Hi, I'm Paul Epstein, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Welcome to A Productive Conversation. I'm Mike Vardy. Today, I have a fascinating conversation with Paul Epstein. He's the author of the book, Better Decisions Faster, Unshakable Confidence When You Need It Most. Paul is an expert in high-performance mindset and decision-making, having worked with top athletes, executives, and teams. Now, in this episode, Paul shares his insights on how to make better decisions faster by balancing your head, heart, and hands. He explains the importance of understanding the difference between fast and faster decisions and how to navigate the messy middle of tough choices. You'll learn about Paul's head, heart, hands equation, which helps you assess whether a decision is a green light, a red light, or a yellow light. And he also dives into the nuances of good and bad yellow light decisions and how to avoid getting stuck in indecision. We also explore Paul's personal journey of making a Jerry Maguire leap, I love that movie, from the sports industry, and how discovering his core values helped him find greater purpose and impact. So whether you're facing a major life decision or just trying to be more productive and decisive in your daily life, this conversation is sure to provide valuable insights and inspiration. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this, A Productive Conversation with Paul Epstein. Paul, thanks so much for taking the time to join me today on the program.
Yeah, fired up to be here, Mike.
So before we got started, we touched on, those who've listened to my show for a while know I'm a sports fan, and they know I follow the weirdest teams based on where I live, and there's weird reasons for that. You can share past episodes, or you can email me if you want to know why I like the Bengals, even though I never lived in Cincinnati, or why I like the Spurs, even though I never lived in San Antonio. But you've worked with a good number of high performers, not just in the realm of sport, but outside of it. And when I'm looking at your latest book, Better Decisions Faster, Unshakable Confidence When You Need It Most, the idea of it's interesting when you see the term better and faster next to each other or close to each other, people get like, oh, this is great. But do you think that the tricky part that I think people come across is they either get stuck with the faster, which means that they make poorer decisions, or they get very reactionary, or they focus on better and they're not moving quickly enough. So can we go into kind of like the how you're able to kind of mesh those together so we get a nice balance between quantity and quality?
Absolutely. So, title of the book, you just said it, Better Decisions Faster. Let me go in reverse order. Let me start with faster. Let's be fast and let's get to faster, and then I'll double click on the better. Key differentiating factor here, and this is massively critical. There is a difference between fast and faster. Faster is relative to the other way that you could have made the decision. So instead of staying stuck in a dead-end job or a dead-end relationship where I know this isn't the person, I know this is not the ladder that I want to climb. Maybe it takes me 9 months, 12 months, 15 months, 18 months, but that's better than never. So I would call that faster. Versus fast would be, hey, make a flippant decision, leave the job. You've got 3 kiddos at home and all of a sudden you can't pay the mortgage. That is not what I'm advising. That would just be fast.
Right.
And so obviously that's where the quality control of better comes in, but still let's separate fast and faster. And so for me, I always say, hey, a lot of folks know I took a Jerry Maguire leap out of the sports industry. I made the mental decision almost a year before I made the physical decision. And so then there were the micro actions that created some progress and some momentum and some confidence to bridge the gap. Okay, so that's fast versus faster. Now we cleared that. The better is based on what I call the head, heart, hands equation. This equation is the heartbeat of the entire book. It's the process, it's the system, it's the framework. So Captain Obvious once said, you should go make better decisions faster. Trust me, Mike, and everyone listening and watching, I would not have become a best-selling author with Better Decisions Faster if I would have ended at the title.
Right.
It was very much the how. The $1 million question is, how do I make better decisions faster? So here's a 1 or 2 minute masterclass. The head, heart, hands equation. Think of your head as your mindset, your heart as your authenticity, and hands as your action. The equation is head plus heart equals hands. In other words, when deciding whether to use your hands, whether to take action, there's two checkpoints, head and heart. Head check, do I think it's a good idea? Heart check, do I feel it's a good idea? And just like when we're driving a car, we pull up to an intersection, we know exactly what to do. Green is go, red is stop, yellow is assess. That's exactly how the equation works. When your head and heart are on board, it's a green light. 10 out of 10 times you take that action. The opposite, no head, no heart, red light, don't do it, stop doing it. And then that messy middle of yellow, when only your head or your heart is on board. So the real mission of the book is, I believe that we deserve a green light life, green light health, green light relationships, green light with every single aspect of life that matters to us, means something to us. I want everybody to live in that green light zone. But in order to do that, we're going to have to consciously stop running reds, because those reds, the compounding effect of running reds for months or years, and you ask yourself, how did I get here? Why am I unhappy? Why am I unfulfilled? Why did I get stuck? Why am I burned out? None of that happened overnight. That's a byproduct of running a lot of red lights without you even knowing it. So the head, heart, hands equation makes us aware to not run reds. And then inside of the book, the real masterclass, and what I cannot justify in a brief podcast or an interview, is there is a messy middle of yellow, and our tougher culture always going to end up in the yellow. When I do this in front of keynote audience of hundreds or thousands, I say, tell them, think of your MVDs, like sports, MVP is the most valuable player. I say, think of a most valuable decision that you're currently challenged with, you're stuck, maybe you don't know what to do. And they think of it. And I say, raise your hand if you ended up in a green and then a red and then a yellow. 10 to 20% raise green, 0% raise red, and about 80 to 90% raise it for the yellow.
Yeah.
So that's the real juice of the book, is let's conquer and navigate this messy middle of yellow.
It's interesting because as you were talking about that, I couldn't help but think about the three realms of productivity that I talk about in my work, which is reckless, ruthless, and reasoned. And reckless is like pure emotion. Like emotion is dominating. So you're checking off random boxes. You're trying to get as much done as you can with very little rhyme or reason. But the problem with that, of course, is it the right action? Are you doing the right things? Is it like, you're wondering, okay, well, I did all these things, but yet you still feel kind of like, did I do the right things? And then with ruthless, it's very myopic. It's almost purely logical. Well, this is what I should do based on, again, it's kind of like heart versus head, like you're talking about, but the reasoned part. And I don't say reasonable because that, reasonable sounds, almost like less than, or it's not an achievable, like people don't want to just do a reasonable amount of things, but they do want to do reasoned things. And I couldn't help but just note, like, as you were talking about, like when the yellow light shows up, that's reason, because there's such a middle, like there's so much middle between emotion and logic, and reason kind of lands in the middle. And so to your point about the yellow, it's like, yeah, so can we dive deep? I see you nodding, no one can see this, but let's dig into that.
Yeah, and I want to follow your lead on the next question. I want to actually just quickly double click on one thing, because the beauty of the head, heart, hands equation relative to this logic and emotion dance that you just described, I don't care if your hard wiring is for I'm more emotional or I'm more logical. Like, hey, I've worked with sales enterprises. I've worked with engineers. They typically fall on opposite sides. Right. One very emotion, one very logic. The beauty is, notice it wasn't head or heart. It's head and heart. A green light can only happen when they're both on board. So for me, my bias, my personality, as you could probably tell by hearing me talk, I am a passion and an energy. I'm a heart guy. I also was a sales guy for the majority of my career, from entry to executive level, NFL, NBA, the whole thing. So I need to make sure that I'm doing the head check to make sure that it's a better decision. Otherwise, I'm just going to be an emotional beast. Now, there's people that are hardwired for the opposite, and they're going to collect data and information and they suffer from paralysis. I don't suffer from paralysis, but that's because my bias is heart. Yes. But the bias of the head is like, hey, do you really want this? Like, is this really like authentically, truly you? So the equation forces head people to check in with heart and heart people to check in with head. And only the yes and leads to green lights.
Yeah. And to your point, you can't, there is no absolute. That's the thing, is that so many people want absolute and they don't recognize nuance. When it
Yep.
comes to decisions, how important is it for people to not only be aware that there will be nuance, but how to deal with nuances that fall within those decision-making factors?
Nuance is especially critical with yellows because, frankly, greens and reds are primarily awareness, obvious. You kind of know a green.
Right.
You know a red. Whether you act or decide consistent with reds and greens, that's a different conversation. And that's probably a cocktail to be named later.
Yeah.
Okay. But the yellow, that messy middle, that is the nuance. That's why I call it messy. Messy is kind of nuanced, right? It's gray. It's gray.
Mhm.
So here's a quick tidbit on yellows that can help dramatically. Not all yellows are created equal. What I mean by that is one type of yellow is when your head is on board and your heart is out. The other is when your heart is in and your head is not quite there. There's a good yellow and a bad yellow. The good yellow are the yellows that can eventually have a chance to become a green.
Right.
The bad yellows are the dead ends that will never become a green. And the way that I would say this in front of an audience, whether on stage or here in a podcast, is out of your head and your heart, which do you think has the greater potential and capacity to change, to improve, to evolve over time? And when folks think about it, they say, well, some people get stuck actually with that answer. And I say, okay, fine. If you hired me as a mindset coach, which I've done with NFL teams, NBA teams, and Fortune CEOs, Navy SEALs, Olympic athletes. Like, I understand mindset. If you locked me in a room with anybody in the world for 30, 60, 90 days, and I said, let's get your mindset better, I promise you, we can improve it. We can improve. The head can improve. The mind can improve. However, you going to wake up with a new heart tomorrow? Probably not.
No.
And so if your heart's not going to change, the bad yellow is when only your head is on board and your heart will probably never join that party. But the good yellow is when your heart is in and maybe you just got a little bit of pollution in the mind that you got to clear out. Maybe there's a self-limiting belief, or maybe you need to talk to a coach or a mentor, an advisor, your partner, your spouse, whatever. Like, you can do the hard work in the mind and have a chance to turn that heart in yellow into a green if your head joins for the party, but we're lying to ourselves when we think that our heart is going to change.
How do you let go of the yellows that aren't going to move forward and turn red? Or better still, how do you let go of the reds? Because the reds are going to be there. Like, you're going to notice them. I think a lot of people have they try to force it, right? Or they'll try to, so it in essence, I believe that removes decisiveness, like ultimate decisiveness from it. How do you keep someone from saying, well, maybe we'll just bring this back in when it's clearly something that they need to let go of or be decisive about?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. One is sometimes you need to experience for yourself. Just like I could give you a bunch of dating advice, sometimes you got to date your own crazy to eventually find the one.
Right.
Okay. So
Yep.
you got to go on some bad dates to know what a good date is. And that's just a life experience. But here's like a professional example that I always come back to because I used to suffer massively from yellow lights and the bad yellow lights. Here's what it was. So I'm leading big sales teams and sales organizations inside of the NFL and NBA, like triple digit number of teams. And so out of the hundreds, you've got a lot of high producers, high performers, and sometimes, just to call a spade, I'm not saying this is unanimous, but there can be some people that are really good at selling widgets, but they ain't so great in the locker room.
Right.
Okay. They're just tough to manage. Like, it's a lot. Like, I don't need to beat that one up, but let's just say that my head loved their performance, their production. I loved that they sold a lot of widgets. We were climbing careers. We were winning. We were making shareholders happy. The boss is happy. Like, everyone's like, hey, keep selling widgets. But my heart knew they weren't a keeper. So my head said, keep them for selfish reasons, but my heart knew they weren't a keeper. So I kept them because I believe that business slants more head than heart. So I played the head game without knowing there was an equation. I wish I would have had this playbook back then. So I keep these people. And now years go by and I'm keeping yellow lights in my locker room. And now I've got culture problems. I've got engagement problems. Some of my best people were now leaving because they said, Paul, you're tolerating horrible behavior, and which was true at that time. And then the marketplace started to become aware of this. And so now I have recruiting problems. And if I could coach and consult and advise the Paul of those chapters, I would have said, Paul, you didn't have a culture problem or an engagement problem or a recruiting problem or a retention problem. You had a yellow light problem. If I would have been true to my heart, I would have known this is not a green light person. And so as a result, I would have made the decision through whatever process I had to make it to say, I'm going to manage out anybody that's not a green light.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, it's got to be a non-negotiable. But I see that's the beauty of this framework versus before. I'm like, well, but I like this person. Well, but I enjoy having beers with them. Well, but they're going through something in their personal. Like, I would add context to justify and rationalize it. And that's the beauty of this equation. It's kind of like dude, it's a green, it's a yellow, it's a red. And if it's a yellow, is it the good yellow or the bad yellow? And you kind of pause there. So that's one piece. Is you ask how to manage out. The beauty of green, yellow, red, and head, heart, hands is it's simple, it's sticky, it's memorable. It lets you label things or people or jobs. And you just have to have the conviction and the clarity to say, well, now let's pull triggers. But the final thing I'll say is I'm a big part of why I wrote the book is to overcome the problems of paralysis and indecision. Indecision is the worst decision that we can make. The challenge, Mike, is, you said, oh, well, how do we get out of those, whether it's a dead end red or that nasty middle of yellow? Sadly, I think there's too many people that stay stuck in the yellow and stuck in the red, even if they know that they're there.
Yeah.
And part of my advice for that individual would be, you don't need to make a radical change tomorrow, but you need to take steps to go from your current state to the optimal future state. If you know you're in a dead end relationship, if you know you're climbing the wrong ladder, if you hate your industry, if you hate your boss, if you hate your company, if you hate who you live with, like, I'm sorry, that's probably not going to change. And I don't want to sound mean. I just want to be very real.
Right.
And if that's the case, I'm not telling you to change jobs. I'm not telling you to file paperwork with an attorney tomorrow. I am telling you that take baby steps. In a professional setting, take some coffee meetings with people in your network that do something that interests you or you're curious about. Talk to your mentor, hire a coach, hang around with people that embody the types of characteristics that might be lacking in your company. Surround yourself with those people. Oh, you feel bored or complacent in your job. Great. Go join a group of high performers and high achievers to do something that's not work related, so it revitalizes you and gets your energy up. That's an action that will actually eventually say, I can't hang out in this professional home, but people don't do that bridge work. It's the bridge work. They're afraid and paralyzed of the end outcome or decision. I'm like, dude, you're thinking of it the wrong way. Don't pull the eventual trigger tomorrow. Take the micro actions. That's how I created Win Monday. I didn't say win the year, win the decade, win the century. No. Win Monday so you have momentum to win the week. Take the small action so you have more belief and hope and optimism and confidence to say, I'm going in the right direction. My life won't be massively better or different tomorrow, but I'm headed in the right direction. And the compounding effect of that progress leads to unstoppable momentum. And that's really the spirit of Winning Monday. We could apply it to every decision and every action we take.
So I want to come back to that for sure, because
Yep.
I think that I can tell you that people, when I work with them in the productivity and time management space, I get a lot of, man, I just have so much to do. There's so many things I've got to do. And you said the hard truth of like, look, I think it's up to us to say, like I've said to the people, I'm like, you're always going to have lots to do. Like, I hate to break it to you. There's always going to be stuff on your
Welcome
list.
to life.
And also,
Welcome
you're
to
never
life.
going to get it all done. Like, there you go. Like, you're never going to get it all done, but you get to choose
Amen.
what you are going to do. And it's funny because I have people like, I'll say, well, you could theme a day. And they're like, oh, I can't do that. I'm like, then you do pattern breaking sports. You'll get it. It's like, when did you watch football? Yes, of course I watch football. I watch football every Sunday. Okay, great. So Sunday's like your football day. Yeah. I love, oh, I'm like, yeah, like you theme a day that way. Or if you go to church, you theme a day that way. But so you
Hmm.
can do it. You're just making choices not to. And I wonder when you're doing this work with people, when you're sharing this, especially in the realm of like sport, like there's a lot of micro actions that happen in sports, and many of them aren't sexy. Like David Robinson on his podcast with his son said, in order to be great, you have to be great at the fundamentals. And the Spurs, as a basketball team, have never been like the Showtime Lakers, for example, or anything like that. But they've been fundamentally sound, and this is the system, and we follow the system. And oh, look, we're winning. So for somebody who is struggling with this idea that, you know, how do I slow down to make these decisions? I love the binary ish. And I say ish because it's not black or white, but there's elements of your framing that, you know, it's kind of like going to the recycling bin and going, oh, this is a glass cup. It goes in the glass bin. Oh, this is the, like, once you get that dialed in, you kind of know where this goes in this bin. And eventually you don't even have to look at the bin anymore. You just know where the bin is.
Right.
People are making decisions all the time. How do you break through the biases that people have of like, this is a tough decision. Like, I don't really, you know, with the understanding that you're making decisions constantly, like how do you help ingrain this into their psyche?
Fun fact, I learned this through the research that led up to the book of Better Decisions Faster. The average adult makes 35,000 decisions in a day. 35,000. So if you're listening, you're watching, or me, you, dude, we're making 35,000 decisions today. Now, the majority, thankfully, are going to be on autopilot. I turn left into the driveway, I brush my teeth. I hope we don't need a book like Better Decisions Faster for those types of decisions. But that's where the MVDs come in.
Right.
I only wrote this book for the ones that genuinely mean something to you, matter to you. They have to be of significance. And MVD is a most valuable decision. If there's no value in the decision, if you don't care about what the outcome is, if you don't care about the person or the job or the career plan or the investment strategy or investment portfolio, or do I do the deal or not? Do I hire, fire, promote? If you're not attaching meaning to that, then it's not really a valuable decision. In which case, I would say you should save the bandwidth for the head, heart, hands equation to only be for the things that do mean something, that do matter to you, or better yet, the ones where you don't know what to do. Because I think green and red is going to be pretty obvious. But I literally, whether I'm putting my consulting hat on, whether I'm putting my training hat on, my coaching hat on, I literally tell people after I educate them on the head, heart, hands equation, I say, okay, so I don't care if we're talking about a team member, about a project, about a strategy. I say, is it a green, yellow, or red?
Yeah.
Simple. Like, just let's get to it. And then we can ask sub questions, but it's a beautiful way to just like overcome paralysis and indecision by you've already done half of the work of making the decision when you label it green, yellow, or red.
Right.
That's why I created this. It wasn't to get everyone to the finish line. You're going to have to do some hard work in the second half. But if I can get you to the 50-yard line within a matter of seconds or minutes, how beautiful is that?
Well, not only that, but I think the other thing is that you're making it so that the friction is removed, the real core
Yes.
elements of friction. It's the same thing when somebody says, I've got so much to do. And then I look at their to-do list and it goes bill. I'm like, what are you doing with bill? Are you paying a bill? Are you calling bill? Like, verbs matter. If you added a verb in front of every action on your to-do list, you've already removed a little bit of friction. So, and color
That's
really,
interesting.
yeah, but you know what? Color works too, like green, yellow, red, like that. I want to see, and if you don't want to go along with this, that's fine. But I find it to be an interesting, unique opportunity and an experiment because as we're recording this, the NBA draft has just ended. Like, it was yesterday, the second day.
Mm-hmm.
On the second day, the LA Lakers did something very interesting involving, and you know exactly what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah.
So there is the Lakers chose with the 55th pick a kid by the name of Bronny James. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because his dad plays, and I say plays loosely because his contract was coming up for the Lakers. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember reading like he wants to play with his son. That's like he would go wherever his son was going to be playing. The LeBron's son you could argue has not put up exactly like world beating numbers in college. I mean, if you're looking
Sure.
at it purely from
Look, I'm a USC Trojan. I wish he would have scored 30 a game, but he
he
didn't.
didn't.
I wish.
So when you can we apply that? Because number one, there's a couple things. Number one, there's the heart factor there. Obviously,
Yep.
there's the head
Of
factor
course.
there, but there's also the pressure of the clock, right? And other decisions that other people made up to that point that led to you're on the clock. You've got X number of minutes to make this call. And for me, it sounds like, and again, I'd love for your assessment, they went with the heart. The heart, it's like but there is some head factor in there because they now know they get to keep LeBron, right? Like they have the edge in keeping LeBron. So can you walk through, like, or at least, I think this would be an interesting experiment just to see like how that might have looked, like what your assessment is of something like that. Is that something you're comfortable doing?
Absolutely. Yeah. This is raw. This is real. Let's go for it. Okay. Heart is where you're going to endorse your family, support your family unconditionally. Like some would almost say you're over indexing on family. And I'd say, well, shoot me. Like, of
Yeah.
course, I'm going to do anything I can for my kids. And like, I'm going to stretch the boundaries until whatever, probably things I can't say on a podcast. Like, I'm going to do what I need to do to take care of and love on and protect my immediate family. Son, done. Mic drop. Okay. So that's the heart. LeBron James, of course, wanted to play with his son. The truth serum will say, did his son want to play with his dad? My gut tells me that whether he wanted to as badly as dad wanted his son, my gut tells me that if he didn't want to, his dad probably would have known about that. They probably would have had a courageous conversation, and then the Lakers don't end up drafting him. That's just my assumption.
Right.
So let's leave it at there was mutual interest in playing with each other. Now, here's the reality. The heart says draft your son, and the heart says, hey, LeBron, if I'm LeBron, I'm going to talk to the organization confidentially, of course, and this will never be public information. And he's going to say like, hey, if he's there, like, let's get kiddo.
Mhm.
And okay, so that's cool. But now the head has to kick in. So what's the opportunity cost? If I didn't pick Bronny, what's my next best alternative? What's my next best choice? And I don't want to get into the semantics of the NBA draft because for all I know, 80% don't care about basketball that are listening. And
Sure.
I don't care. Like at the end of the day, I'm going to give like a very vanilla way of describing this. The way the NBA draft works, there's roughly 30 players drafted in the first round, roughly 30 in the second round. And what most draft gurus will tell you is, I mean, look, there's always random luck. The number 50 player, the number 38 player drafted could end up being a Hall of Famer. It happens. There's always exceptions. But for the most part, on most years, there's 5, 10, maybe 15 significant players that you say they can make an impact on my roster as rookies in their first year. So if somebody gets drafted 55, the next best bet or risk or alternative, it's not like there was some future Hall of Fame slam dunk guarantee that they could have drafted at 55. So now the other logic is, well, I'm going to take him, because most importantly, I get to keep his dad on the roster, which there was a chance LeBron James probably wasn't, but he could have left.
Mhm.
And so now this guarantees that he'll stay. So you would argue that's better than drafting, the top pick in the draft. It's like, he's one of the GOATs. He's one of the greatest of all time. So that's kind of how I would think about this is like, for me, and this is where I said, good yellow, bad yellow. In this case, the heart was in. So now we had to justify with our head if it can join for the party. What I just did was give you the inside basketball talk of my head saying, oh, yeah, dude, there's not a lot of risk in doing this. Who else are you going to take? Oh, that person, they might not even make the roster. Let's take him so we can keep dad, so we can hopefully. And that's the head saying, heart, I'm going to join you for the party. That's how I would have applied this head, heart, hands equation to the Lakers scenario. And I'm going to kick it back to you, but I also have other scenarios that are real in my life of like times I've leaned into my heart where sometimes it ends up in a good place and there is a happy ending to the story. And other times there's not, but I don't have regret. And so we can totally riff on heart-based yellows. But that, to answer your question, is how I would have processed the head, heart, hands equation for what the Lakers just did yesterday.
Well, that's actually really where I want to go, but I want to go back to your origin story about the Jerry Maguire thing that you alluded to initially. So I love that movie, and I love it mainly. Let's put it this way. I love the very beginning, the transformation that happens in the very early
Yep.
parts of it. I'm a night owl, so I love the fact he stayed up till the wee hours of the morning to write things we do, the things we do. But what is it? I've got the essay right here. Yeah, I'll link to it in the show notes. The things we think and do not say. And there's a whole
Mm,
story behind Cameron Crowe writing it, and you can actually read the entire speech there. And I remember seeing him do that and going, he's going to minimize, he's going to focus on less things and do them better. Like he's going to have a small stable and he's going to do them
mm,
the right way. And I'm like, that took a lot of balls. Like all of the
hmm.
things to that point, he broke up with his, his girlfriend, fiance, I can't remember what she was, but you must have, when you made that leap, there must have been some elements of what we're talking about today that played a factor in that. So can you share that, as well as the kind of like the feeling you had when you saw that movie and you read, like you saw what he was doing and putting together that basically that manifesto that, he followed, and a bunch of people were like, yeah, whatever, dude.
The Jerry Maguire leap was me taking the leap after 15 really successful years, many of them high profile in the NFL and NBA. It was a kid in a candy store journey. I wouldn't have changed a thing. I look back and I've got no regrets, but yet to this day, I've never felt more alive. And it's because of the not only the decision I made, but why I made the decision. And it was a retreat when I was head of revenue, head of sales for the San Francisco 49ers. And these 2 days offsite changed my life. It was about personal discovery, personal growth, personal transformation. Specifically, let's find your why. Let's identify what your core values are. I ended up getting really obsessed and saying, oh my gosh, I don't want these things to be distant North Stars. How do I apply them on a Monday morning? So the origin story of what today is Win Monday was the Monday after the retreat changed my life forever because I made decisions and took actions to continue the momentum of the self-discovery process that I went through the week prior at this retreat. Mike, I had never done any of that internal work. I was too busy climbing, too busy growing, too busy succeeding. Nothing was broken. My LinkedIn profile looked sexier and sexier by the week, month, and year. Nothing was broken. And it's really damn hard to change when things are going well.
Right.
So I would not have taken that Jerry Maguire leap if it wasn't for the internal work. The way I would apply it to everything we've talked about in this conversation, though, until you really know who you are at your core, who you are from the inside out, then you don't have clarity and conviction in your heart. I couldn't have described Paul is a person of, and now I can tell you, I know my 5 core values, and I would fall on the sword for any of them: impact, courage, growth, belief, authenticity. Those 5 words describe me. I don't need to keep going. Tether any of my big decisions, tether any of my big actions, and I will filter it. Those are my lens, and that's how I make decisions and take actions. And ever since I started to gain momentum through this values-based system of making decisions and taking actions, that's where my heart finally opened up. And here was the number one way that I knew that I had to leave sports. I After realizing that my core value was authenticity, one of my 5, I realized that I was being very inauthentic.
Right.
I felt a massive amount of tension. Like, Paul, you've got a work version of you, and then you've got you. Which one are you? Who are you not? How do you bring these 2 versions to become one? And this was the internal work that I had to do in private on my own, because there was just a pit in my stomach that it wasn't instant after the retreat, but over as the months went on and as the months went on, I just was less excited to go in. I was less enthusiastic. I wasn't as happy. I wasn't as fulfilled. And it had nothing to do with the job. I actually got a promotion a couple months after. So it had nothing to do with title, money, or responsibilities. But it was this internal piece of, how do you really feel when you're driving to the job? How do you really feel when you're driving home? And that litmus test can tell you a lot. And so that's ultimately when I realized I had those gaps. Then another one of my values, which is my strongest value because it's based on losing my hero at 19 years old. I lost my dad at 19, and he was a continuation school teacher. He was a man of impact. He left people in places better than he found them. Like, that's why he was on this earth. And so taking that legacy factor of my dad and now connecting it to my purpose, if impact was what got him out of bed, I said, I'm going to chase impact till the day I die. I am on a relentless and just a never ending quest and pursuit of impact. So I asked myself this question, Mike: if I stayed in the sports industry, or if I took the leap, where can I serve a greater impact? Is there greater impact inside of the four walls of the business or beyond this industry? And when I asked myself that question and attached it to my late father, my hero, as a person of impact, I knew I had to leave sports, because staying in sports, I would have been leaving impact on the table.
So,
And everything, yeah, go ahead. But
no,
everything I've
but
shared in the past
interestingly,
couple of minutes is all my heart.
but you brought up authenticity first, and I don't think you could have answered that question authentically if you hadn't done the work on that as well, right? Like, because you could say, is this really,
100%.
you're like, am I being authentic? No, like, no, I'm not. Okay, then I have to go back and, you know what I mean? Like, it's so, it's weird because the world conspires to not give us the time to do this, I think. Like, I mean, I'm not saying, and it's decisions that we make that kind of, again, it comes down to choices. Like, I'm either like going on a retreat. There's so many people that could benefit from going on just a small retreat on their own with the right guidance, like, and shut off your phone, like but
Yeah.
it's hard because there's so much noise. There's so much, like, we live in a culture of speed, 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 now, fast, fast, fast. And notice I said fast, not faster.
Mhm.
But the point is that it takes a moment to pause. And what I find interesting about decision making is that decision making initially, when you deal with something the first time. I just finished having a chat with one of my colleagues, Patrick Rowan. We do a series on this podcast, and we talked about like the urgent and the important, and we ultimately talked about like reaction versus responsiveness, right? And I think the first time you deal with something, it's very reactive, like the action that you need to
Mhm.
take to deal with it. But then afterwards, like in the military, and you worked with Navy SEALs, there's the after action report, right? Like, okay, this happened. How do we mitigate anything that we could control after the fact? So that way, if we come across this again, we at least know, okay, well, this is how we respond as opposed to react. And I think this is such a reactionary, like, it's people hear about being proactive. And again, the diagram of like heart, head, and then the middle, right? Like that idea of emotion, logic, reason, right? Well, the idea of react, and proact, like being reactive, being proactive, responsiveness lies in the middle there, as far as I'm concerned, right? Because it's measured there. It requires a bit of a pause that people don't feel that they can take, and or at least that's the generality that you see out there. What I love about the framework that you've taught is that, and you've put in the book, is that the pause doesn't have to be terribly long, because it's just,
Right.
what is it, green? Is it yellow? Is it red? The pause is
Mhm.
the pause involves a decision as opposed to involving just the pause, right?
Yeah, I think a tactical exercise is, as you've been listening to this, and an action item to keep your growth and momentum going forward, is write down 2 or 3 MVDs, most valuable decisions. Write them down. Just acknowledge, like, there are some unmade decisions in your life. I know this to be true because I have pending MVDs. You have it. Everyone has it. So let's put them down on paper, and then, using the head, heart, hands equation, attach green, yellow, or red. And that in itself acknowledges there is a decision to be made. I now hopefully have more clarity on which direction to go in. And then now I need to do the harder work, which is going to be eventually making a decision, but ultimately, like, just that internal tug of like that heart-based authenticity, no BS. Like, is this really true? Like, is this how I really feel? Like, no, if nobody else would ever find out about the decision I made, is this authentically? And like, you got to do that heart-based work. And then obviously we got to get out of our own heads and the self-limiting beliefs. So that's the hard part. I'm just helping with really what I would say is the first 50, 60% of the journey, to say, hey, at least now you have momentum to be more decisive and not suffer from paralysis.
Speaking of momentum, I know you want to share something with our listeners before we wrap up. But before we do that, the book is called Better Decisions Faster: Unshakable Confidence When You Need It Most. Paul, where can people keep up with your work online? And then let's share that special link that you wanted, the special offer that you want to share with our listeners.
Absolutely. So the home for everything and anything relative to speaking and books, paulepsteinspeaks.com. You will find a treasure trove of information and resources and goodies and even a confidence quiz, all that good stuff, paulepsteinspeaks.com. Where I'm really excited is to talk to you about Win Monday. And as I call it, Monday momentum, because when we win Monday, we have momentum to win the week. So in this fast paced world, this productive world where we're just striving to be the most productive and highest performing and highest achieving version of ourselves, I've realized that I need to disrupt certain patterns, and I do it every Monday so that we can be intentional about what's one thing I can do this week. It's a tactic, it's a tool, it's a tip, it's strategy, it's a mindset shift, but it's just one thing. And so by joining Monday Momentum, which you can find at winmonday.win, just plop in your name and email at winmonday.win. It starts you on a 52-week journey and a 52-week adventure. So if today's conversation resonated with you, whether it's being more confident, making better decisions faster, earning that green light life, navigating the messy middle of yellow, stop running reds, all the stuff that we riffed on, then I invite you into the party, and I'll be in your inbox once a week on a Monday, and it's going to be just one thing. And that way you have momentum to win the week, and then rinse, repeat. The start here button always comes the next Monday. So if you're kicking butt one week, amazing. Let's look forward to the next week. If you had an off week, which we all do, we're all human, Monday is a beautiful reset button. So head over to winmonday.win and let's do it.
Paul, thanks so much for having a productive conversation with me today.
Thank you.
As always, big thanks to my guest this time, Paul Epstein, for joining me on the program. You can check out all of the relevant links within the show notes, which you can find at mikevardy.com/podcast539. You can also check out the show notes and the links wherever you get your podcasts, be it YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're checking that out, if you're new to the show, I'd love for you to subscribe to the podcast. It makes it easier to find all of the 530 plus episodes that you might want to peruse. You get access to them quickly. Not only that, but you won't miss a single episode of what's to come. And there are plenty of great episodes to come. So hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. Another way to support the show is to check out the sponsors that you heard during our conversation today. Go to mikevardy.com/podcast sponsors. Choose the ones that resonate with you. And then when you click on that link, they know that we sent you there. And that just helps keep the lights on, or I guess the headphones running, or whatever the audio equivalent of lighting is. That's it for this episode. Thanks so much for taking the time to check out A Productive Conversation, whether you're new to the show or whether you're a longtime subscriber or whether you're somewhere in between. Until next time, I'm Mike Vardy, the host of A Productive Conversation, reminding you to stop doing productive and start being productive. See you later.